Nerdarchy, Foreign Arts, Fine Arts, and today I got Chris Seaman in the house with me today. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. How are you? Thanks for
Good.
having me.
Thanks for coming on. It was so awesome to look at your website and all the stuff that you've done, and I'm like, hey, I know this stuff. I've seen this stuff before. It's in books
I've been
I
under
own.
the radar.
I have to confess, before starting to do Nerdarchy, I really never paid attention to the people that created these things that we like so much. Even like the bigger names, like Merles and Perkins and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
I just bought the books and played the game, and then once we started getting more involved in the community and the industry as a whole, it's been a real eye opener. And then even more so with doing these live chats, I'll have someone on, and then you realize like their name has been populated throughout so much of the stuff I own. But
Right.
maybe they're like an editor or something. So
Right.
it's not like a super glamorous job, but it's essential.
Yeah, it's like making a movie, with the credits, you open up a book and you flip through and you go, "Oh yeah, I recognize that name." "Oh wait, what?" Just a ton of people involved behind the scenes.
Like your half orc paladin is fairly iconic.
Yeah, that was so fun to paint. That was you know, occasionally I'll get an assignment from Watsy, and it's just like, oh, this is totally me. This is my personality. This is my sense of humor, or whatever it might be. And that was one of the ones that was one of the paintings I did that was I just loved working on it. I also loved working on the gnomes too. Those were a lot of fun. Um,
Well, I must
you know,
say, from more recently, your ogres are I'm a big fan of those.
oh yeah, those are yeah, those are super fun, man. Those are super fun characters to work on.
So, as always, folks, in the description you can find a ton of links, not lumps, to follow Chris and check out the stuff he's doing. Because you're all, not only have you done a lot of works for publications that people are familiar with, you also have your own line, the Cameo Creeps, which are really cool.
Right, yeah, the miniature monster paintings.
Yes.
I started those. I launched a Kickstarter in 2016 to fund the initial round of stuff, and it was really just a test. It was like, okay, well, I'm going to use Kickstarter as a way to see if people are even interested in this, because it was really prior to me launching the Kickstarter. I really didn't have a whole lot of advertising for it. It was just kind of an offshoot thing that I was doing. I'm going to do these little monster paintings. I think they're fun. They're Elizabethan style with, the things that I like, my sense of humor, my sensibilities of horror art and fantasy and whimsy. And I kind of smashed them all into one thing and came up with this idea as a way to make a little bit of money actually on the side at like collector conventions and stuff. And I sold all of them, and I just kept selling them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, maybe I should, market this and see what I can do with it. And that was the Kickstarter that I launched in 2016. And it took a year to get all the production done and all the prototyping. But I had a blast doing it, seeing it all come to fruition at the end. It was like, oh wow, when we actually first pulled the first Cameo Creep, I actually have one here. We actually pulled the first Cameo Creep off the line, because we do all the assembly here. Like, we were just stoked, and it was just like, holy crap, this actually worked and people like it. And I keep selling them. So I mean, we're actually starting the second. So I've released 3 sets of 12 so far, and they're all different monsters. I kind of describe them as like adult garbage pail kids. They're art for your game room. They're art for just fun. But they come framed and they're ready to hang right on the wall. And of course, each character has a backstory. And I'm currently working on the world building with the fantastic writer G.D. Falkson. Um, and we're hopefully going to launch another Kickstarter for all the stories and everything. So it'll be a book, and it'll have all the artwork in it and all the fun stuff that I've been doing behind the scenes in the fall. So if you get a chance, please sign up on my mailing list or follow me on Kickstarter, because there's some really cool stuff coming down the pipe for it. So,
What
but
was the inspiration for the creeps?
Well, I did a painting. I was asked to participate in a zombie show in New York by an incredibly talented illustrator, Travis Louie, who has done work for Sony. He's been around for a very long time. But he saw my work and said, "Hey, would you want to do a painting for this show I'm doing at Last Rites Gallery in New York?" And I said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be fantastic." And the idea came to me to do a zombie Henry VIII. And that's on my website. You can check that out. And I kind of loved everything about doing it. Like, I loved the costuming. I loved the grotesqueness of the monster. I loved my sense of humor that I put into it. And that kind of started it. And I was like, well, I could translate this into smaller paintings. What I started doing was I actually started to look at lockets that, you know, family members would give to each other. You know, oh, you're headed off to the Battle of Waterloo. You know, here, remember your sweetheart. And so the oval, that's kind of how the oval thing happened with the Cameo Creeps. And I shared it with my wife, and she said, you know, you need to call these something because they're really cool. And she came up with the name Cameo Creeps. So, you know, there's my muse for you right there. My wife is my big muse for sure. Yeah, so I started then looking at lockets, and I couldn't find anything that I could get that I thought was cool. Originally, the idea was like, oh, I'll put a locket of a vampire, and then I'll put like a tooth in it. And you could like open it up and see the tooth, and maybe it's a werewolf, and you could see like werewolf hair or something, or, you know, I don't know, something like maybe a little vial of blood or something. But the more that I researched, the more impractical I thought that would actually be. And I was like, oh, that's going to be a real pain in the butt. So I started looking at, I contacted my framer, who I have a really good relationship with over the last couple of years. And I was like, hey, I'm doing these little tiny paintings. Do you think you could find me some like little oval frames? Because I went to Hobby Lobby and Michael's, and here in Northeast Ohio, which is where I'm at, we have a place called Pat Catan's, and they have a frame shop as well. So this is a craft store, and none of them had oval frames. And you know, and the ones that they had were like for weddings and like pretty. And I'm like, no, I want something classy and, you know, wood, and, you know, I don't want plastic. And so he said, hey, I found a place that has these frames. And they're in South Carolina, and do you want me to order them for you? And I said, yeah, order them all. So he ordered 75 for the reproductions, and then for the originals as well that I had left over. So I just bought all the ones that they had. Well, a couple of original sets later, I had sold out. You know, I had sold probably 30 little paintings. And I said, hey, I want to buy more. And he goes, well, you can't.
You got them all.
Because the manufacturer that was making them was a German company, and they were doing they make miniature stuff, and they've been bankrupt. They've been out of business for the last 5 years. So the frames you got were leftovers. So I scoured the rest of the United States as best as I could, particularly on the East Coast, because that's where I'm at. And I found maybe about 100. And then that was it. And so I tried selling reproductions at Dragon Con, and they did really well there. And then I went, man, I can't keep them. Like, people just keep buying them. And
sounds terrible.
It was a horrible situation.
So,
but what ended up happening was I was like, okay, well, there's no way to continue to grow this, so I have to take it to Kickstarter, and I have to fund it myself, and I have to find manufacturers here in the United States, preferably, to make them for me. And that's what I ended up doing. And
so my guess is the Kickstarter was successful.
Yes, we did about $30,000. I needed 21 to pay for all the packaging and the printing and the frames. The frames were the biggest cost at the time. But things are continuing to grow in a really short amount of time. I mean, we released set 1 and 2 to the public last year, about a year ago. I think it was in April of last year, and we've sold 2,000 already. So what little inventory there was a little bit of inventory I put aside just for Origins, and we did well there last weekend. And then I've since have found a new manufacturer to work my frames that's a lot more cost effective, and yeah, super boring stuff, but I don't know. I can talk about it forever.
So the long story short is you found the frames you wanted by having them made, and you've got it. So how many creeps in all have you created?
In total, including customs, I've painted about 88.
Wow, you're about to break through the barrier of time.
Soon I'll hit 100, and then I'll just turn into goo and fall. My
yeah, that's very specific. 88 miles per hour is the only way to break the time barrier.
Yeah, so I mean, I painted a lot, but yeah, they're so fun. I mean, I literally have an endless supply of ideas.
So, do you have a favorite amongst your 88 children?
I have quite a few. Definitely Sir Virgil Melton was probably one of my favorites. He has a candle head.
So when you're painting these and you're coming up with new creeps, I hope you don't mind me shortening it to creeps. Are you just doing the imagery, or in your mind are you also coming up with a story behind this creep, this individual?
Yeah, so kind of how I develop it is that first I don't want any influence, so I don't look at too many things. I'll reference armor, or I'll reference costuming and things like that, but I just go. So it's totally intuitive. I just don't think about it. I just say, okay, well, right now I'm going to paint a creep, and I don't care what it turns out to be like. And what's happened is it's really interesting. Is it's just this natural development as I go. So I'll put an extra eyeball in, and I'll go, oh, that's pretty cool, but maybe I could do something else. So then it just kind of develops that way. And as I'm working on the painting is actually where I start to come up with the names and the story ideas for the characters and things. And that's a blast.
So Sir Milton, you said?
Yeah, Sir Virgil Milton. He's a candlehead. And he's part of the demon court.
How many courts are there?
There's 1, 2, 3, 8 courts.
8 courts, and what are the courts? So we have the demon court.
So there's right now we're actually currently working on new names for everything, because we kind of want them to be unique and fun. But right now we have the ghost court, the werewolf court, the zombie court, the demon court, the mutants, which are like golems, and then the fairies, the fae, and then the Dagonians, which are like the underwater, very Cthulhu-y types, and the vampires. And each court plays a role in this Elizabethan world, So the vampires are like the ritualists and the religious, and the zombies at this time are the ruling class. And the zombie king who's sitting on the throne actually stole it from the ghost court, because they're the true heirs to Crepuscula, which is what we call the world right now. So there's all this infighting and feuding and stuff, but it's all monsters, but there's a dark whimsy to it. So it's light. It's not supposed to be scary per se, but more on the spooky side of things,
Have you ever considered putting an RPG to it? It sounds like it'd be great, the next Ravenloft.
Oh man, that's the best. That is definitely the goal. So because things have happened, things have fast tracked. So things are on the fast track so quickly right now. What my goal was for the world building wasn't supposed to happen until 2019. So it's actually happening now. And so we're a year ahead of schedule. So 2018 we're world building, brand building, and then 2019 is where we're going to start to expand into other things. So possibly a board game, possibly an RPG, definitely books, and continue to share the world and get people interested in the characters that I have available for them to purchase for their rooms and their homes. So it's very fun. Love every minute of it. It's a lot of work though. On top of freelancing and still working in games and still working with Wizards and Hasbro and
it is. Anytime you're running your own business is a lot of work.
It's like two businesses really. Like I have my illustration stuff and then I have my Cameo Creeps stuff. So it's like, ultimately the goal would be to do Cameo Creeps full time. Like that would be the goal. So they're like, yeah, go ahead.
Arsenal lamination action figures, Chris. Some like Todd McFarlane style toys. That would be pretty cool.
Man, I would love to do that. Oh my god, to have one of my characters turn into an action figure is like, that would be the biggest, most satisfying opportunity for a creator to see their two-dimensional idea turn into a three-dimensional thing.
I don't know who the top dogs are in that industry. The only one I think of is Todd McFarlane toys, but only.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, what's interesting is because of Kickstarter, it's allowed a lot of entrepreneurs to like bring to life their creations. So, I mean, I've backed several action figure campaigns. I'm getting ready to do another one actually because I really like what they're doing. But they're just a small independent toy company that's doing these really great figures, and it's cool that that's an opportunity now. Like Kickstarter is a real legit way for us as creators to get our ideas out there.
I think there's one based out of New Jersey that's done a few, and they do like fantasy type stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not really my jam, so I don't know that much about it, but I do have some friends that are really into it, like Travis Bowles of WebDM was telling me, it's like pulling them out and showing them to me and getting all excited.
Oh, cool.
Which, I like that stuff anyway. I just like when people get excited about things.
Right.
So I think that's kind of cool. And he's like, yeah, and I think they're out of New Jersey, but I think they've done a couple Kickstarters, but they're these like high-end action figures, and they're all like, I think like fantasy style stuff.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I always gravitate towards. I'm also a big fan of like 80s cartoons, so anything that has to do with Thundercats or He-Man, like I'm kind of all over. So if it's like a retro figure, like I'm like, oh, I love it.
So it was actually over this weekend that I learned something new. So Thundercats had done a reboot in like 2012 or something.
2011. Yeah, it was awesome. I loved everything about it.
Yeah, it was fairly decent. Well, what I didn't realize until this weekend was Matt Mercer voiced Tigra in that reboot.
Awesome.
Yeah, because I was talking to Rachel Steiner. She does a lot of the modding for Geek and Sundry and D&D and Maze Arcana, and she said that's where she started following Matt Mercer from.
Yeah.
So I was like,
cool.
oh, that's kind of cool, because he's known for a lot of other things, but I didn't realize he had done that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Following all the nerdy breadcrumbs.
Yep, it's the way to do it.
So, what has been your favorite, either commission piece or freelance piece that you've done?
Well, I'd have to. Well, definitely D&D is on the top list. That is my jam. Like I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons. I think I started when I was 11, 12, somewhere around there. A friend of mine bought the red box from the comic shop, and he was like, hey, I don't have anybody to game with. Do you want to play? And I'm like, sure, I think this art is sweet. So yeah, I'll totally do it. So he was the DM and I was the player, and he walked me through the world that he created, and I kind of fell in love with it. And so D&D as in its entirety, like I love working on that game.
You started Did you start doing freelance for Watts in 3rd edition?
4th.
In 4th, okay.
And actually, I had worked with them prior to that on the Harry Potter card game that came out in 2001. That was actually one of my first jobs in freelance.
And you've also said actually before you started, we said you just had some Magic cards drop as well.
Yes. So a new card came out today, actually, this morning, for the Core 19 stuff. Magic's a relatively newer thing for me. I had done another game that I was really in love with Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro called Kaijudo, which was really super fun characters, very cartoony in your face, fun, big monsters. And that was a really fun game to work on. That was a card game. But it was canceled, I think, after 2 years of it being released. So I had been working on it about 2 years prior to its release. Then it was released, and it lasted another 2 years. And then that was kind of it.
When you say Kaijudo, all I can think of now is giant like monsters like King Kong and Godzilla and Gamera and little tiny karate gis.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it was very much like giant monsters, and it's like the kids. So it was geared towards like a younger audience. I'd say 12 to 20 was 12 to 16 was really the target audience. But there were a lot of kids older than that were playing it that I met at a tournament in Dallas that Watsy flew me out to and stuff. And that was really cool. But I had a lot of favorite cards that I worked on that because they let me, when you're told, I think the thing for me, when I have the most fun making a piece of artwork for a game is when an art director is like, you know what, Chris, we trust your vision. We trust what you're going to do. So here's a couple of sentences of what we want. Just go crazy and do your thing. And that's where I have the most fun, is when I'm allowed to play in the world that they've created and come up with something maybe that they hadn't thought of before, or an angle that they hadn't, thought maybe that the particular piece of card art or game art could go. So that's cool. It's fun stuff. I'm very lucky. I'm lucky that I've been so busy for so long too. I mean, I've been consistently working for the last 18 years. In games. So, I mean, I've done work for L5R. I've probably done 150 cards for that game. In my early career, about 150 cards probably for Warlord Saga of the Storm. I did the World of Warcraft trading card game, did a bunch of stuff for that. Still working on Hearthstone. I've been doing work on that since it started. I did some work for Skylanders. I've had work published for Pathfinder. Done a couple of covers for them. A lot of interior art over the years.
I meant to ask you about Skylanders.
What's that?
I meant to ask you about Skylanders because I was just on your website looking at one of the pictures. I'm like, that looks like a Skylander character.
Yeah, so they did a card game that was also an app game. And that's, I had been working on that 2 years prior to its release. And that was a shame because they actually canceled it like 2 months after its release. So like it did not last long at all. And that's just the nature of how it goes. Like you could be working on something and then they go, all right, well, we're done because it just didn't generate what they thought it would generate.
Hey, as long as those checks clear.
Yeah, exactly. Direct deposit.
Yeah, there you go. It was a good run while it lasted.
Yeah.
All 2 months of it.
But yeah, I mean, so like as far as, some of the things that I've worked on that I'm just I'm proud of a lot of the work that I do for D&D and proud of the Cameo Creeps and how far they've come so in such a short amount of time. So.
I will say that none of the bad art that has slipped through has been yours.
Oh, well, that's good. I hope I'm doing something good.
They've had in the earlier days of Nerdarchy, some of this was a lot easier. As the more we do this and the more we get involved with the community and meet the people behind the work, it gets harder and harder to be mean.
You find out we're people. We actually
yeah.
making this stuff somewhere.
You know, as we kind of like cross over and meet more people, it's like, oh, like I really don't like this thing, but I don't really want to be mean to anyone either.
Right,
so,
yeah.
but
well, you know, I mean, I think that's, you know, gosh, that's just part of something that we as artists have to have tough skin for. You know, I mean, I know when I do a painting that I'm not 100% on, and it has to do with time. It has to do with maybe I'm not really feeling the art description 100%. And so, you know, it just happens because we have to generate so much art to make a living. And so, you know, that's something that I think people should understand is that I have to take 6 or 7 pieces of art in a month from WotC for a D&D book. You know, so every painting doesn't necessarily get, you know, the polish that some artists would prefer that we get. And occasionally we're allowed to go back into things and, you know, we have changes to make or things that the art director would like to see. But we're working 12, 14-hour days sometimes longer. I mean, I did a stint where I had a D&D project due on top. Not only am I working on D&D at the same time, but I'm also taking 4 Magic cards, and I might be taking another 2 Hearthstone cards. So my month is filled with not only just working with one client, but I might be working with 2 or 3. And that's what we have to do now to make a living as artists. We have to really hustle. And, you know, my vacation time is when I go to a convention. So I don't work. I don't pick up a pencil. I don't draw. I don't do anything. I try not to.
You know what? There is a question I do like to ask every time I get an artist on here.
Yeah.
How much time a day do you just spend either with a brush or a pencil in your hand?
Oh man, I mean, under the gun, I mean, it could be 14 hours.
And is that an average day?
I'm early. I'd say. Well, I've toned it down a little bit. Only I turned 40, and what I realized if I pulled an all-nighter or something, like it took me longer to recover.
Yeah.
So I couldn't jump back into making art. Like I had to like. But when I was in my 30s, I mean, I was pulling. It was not uncommon for me to be pulling 36-hour days. I mean, at 30. I mean, that's like a day and a half of working literally straight. You know, 36 hours straight to get a deadline done. I'll give you an example. I was finishing some work up for 4th edition, for a 4th edition book that was just on the Dragonborn, and I think I had 5 paintings to do, and on top of that, I was working on World of Warcraft art for the TCG they had. So I had 2 of those going at the same time, and I literally had all my paintings up, working on them. I would work on each one over and over and over again until they were finished. So I had like 6 paintings going at the same time, and I worked for 72 hours straight, and it near killed me. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. That was really dumb. And I was so concerned about hitting a deadline that that's where the pressure came on. And then I realized as I got older, I'm like, wait a minute, they just want good art. Like if I'm a day or 2 late, that's okay. Like they're not going to cut me. Like they know I'm good enough. They know that I'm skilled enough, and then I'm going to deliver something the best of my ability. And there's no reason to kill myself. So I don't. That's just come with age and
wisdom. Yeah. I'm just envisioning.
I don't have to kill myself to hit that deadline. So
I'm just envisioning at the 72 hours of painting and drawing. It's like
it was.
What is this blur effect you're going for? That was my vision by the end.
Well, I mean, I try not to phone things in. So, you know, like if you look at a painting of mine, like I try to make sure I pay attention to how things are made, and I try to pay attention to from head to toe what they're wearing and the costuming. And so, I mean, I really don't fudge areas. You know, if there's a fudge, it's, oh, this is a cloud. You know, there's a fudge there, and that's it. You know, but because fans expect. See, that's the other thing too that's really fun about working for Dungeons and Dragons is that we are the visual storytellers. So we're the ones that are giving the gamers the ammo in their imagination. I always perceive my D&D art as a starting point for gamers to game. Here's an idea of what this thing could look like. And you guys, as the creative people that you are in the gaming industry, go ahead and take it and have fun with it and run with it and have fun with your game. And that's kind of how I've always perceived what I do. Like I'm a starting point. I'm not the end point, you know, and it fuels creativity. That's why I love gaming, because it's all about being creative and storytelling. So if I can if I do a character of, say, I don't know, take for example the ogre catapult slingshot guy, like he's slingshotting goblins over the, you know, but there's all these little elements that I'm putting into how these things were constructed. So there's a sense of realism there, and it could possibly be real in some form or fashion. But I love to hear stories of when gamers take it and they tweak it. They're like, "Oh, I was inspired by this painting you did, and I went in this direction." And I'm like, "That's awesome. That's why I did it," you know. Or like the little bits of storytelling you can do with a character costume, you know, whether it's a you know, an elf or a half-orc paladin or whatever, you know, you can, you know, I decided particularly for that half-orc paladin from 5th edition to make his armor pristine. There's no dirt on it. There's no schmutz. It's all clean. And that was an intentional thing. I mean, and then on the dwarf cleric that I painted then for 5th edition, like he's got crap all over him. He's like covered in dirt. And like that's the little kind of stuff that I like to do. You know, those little storytelling elements that help people, you know, connect the dots. You know,
kind of going back to what you're talking about being rushed. I forget what the name was, but I know Brian Stillman was telling me, like, the old school artists from D&D. They had a name they would all use when they weren't happy with a piece. That they would. Is that what it was? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
That they would sign it. Turn out a little wonky.
Yeah. Which you know, and speaking of Brian Stillman, you're in Eye of the Beholder: Art of D&D, the documentary.
Yes.
And when you sat down to me and I met you for the first time in person, I'm like, this guy looks really familiar and I know him from someplace. And I didn't want to be rude and ask. So I asked like Seth later and he's like, yeah, he's all over the trailer.
Yeah. I was, that was super fun to be a part of. You know, I didn't realize the impact that I don't know. I guess maybe because I'm not like an on-staff. They don't do an on-staff thing anymore, where they have on-staff artists working like they used to. So I feel like I'm a little bit disconnected from the legacy of what Dungeons and Dragons art is. And Brian kind of brought that to my attention. Like, well, wait, no, you're actually part of the legacy of D&D. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that. And that's really cool.
Your stuff is in the books now. So,
what's that?
Your stuff is in the books now.
Yep. And it forever will be, probably until I'm gone, you know. Well, when I'm gone, I'll still be there.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing, too, about what you do is, like, where people may not recognize you, but they may recognize they will recognize the pieces of art you've done.
Right.
And be like, oh, yeah, and they'll know what book that's from, and, maybe they'll think of the adventure or the module that it was used in.
Right.
You know, so I mean, it is very cool. And, you know, when I ran into you at your booth at Origins, and you're like, hey, I got to show you this thing. And, you know, you had the Goblin Hucker mini. You're like, I found this at one of the other stalls. And, like, I don't know if they're going to send me one or not, but it was so cool. It was so cool to see the thing that I drew that someone made into a miniature.
Yes. That's the biggest compliment to me. When another artist takes my vision and turns it into something else, that is so awesome. That's so cool. It's such an honor.
And then I have to imagine, too, certain projects are probably definitely, like you said, like you get that, like, oh yeah, I love the idea of working on this.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are just more special and iconic than others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where some of the pieces just kind of fade into the background, where
Right.
no one's going to forget the ogre that's got a catapult attached to his back and he's
Right.
flinging goblins wearing spiked armor. That's like awesome.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that was fun because they, you know, that's like I said, WotC just kind of let me play in the world. And when you're an artist and you're given the freedom to, you know, here's the setting, here's kind of what we want things to look like, but go ahead and do your thing. That's the most satisfying artistically. You know, there are certain jobs that I've had in the past where it's very rigid. We want this type of armor on this type of dwarf who is holding this type of axe, and we want these kind of boots, and we want him to be standing like this. And that over art direction starts to suck the life out of the project. But as a professional, I work through it and I do it. And, you know, ultimately I'm happy with the final product. But it happens. It happens to everybody. It happens to all the artists that I've ever talked to who are like, yeah, I had this one project. It was really tough.
So
that's okay.
I just kind of like had a thought that it kind of occurred to me. And you're talking about like this idea of, oh, I'm part of this legacy. Just think about it right now. For the first time, there is some kid who's like, you know, in his tweens, just getting started with D&D, right? Well, fast forward to 9th, 10th edition Dungeons and Dragons, you know, when he's talking about how things used to be, you know, as an old dude that's playing the game and you've been retired and maybe you're not working anymore, like your stuff, it'll be in his hands and they'll be looking at it and be like, that's the that paladin.
Right, and that to
you'll
me,
be that your drawing could be their paladin in hell.
Right, and that art. I mean, you cannot ask for, you know, artists. You know, let's say Van Gogh. Okay, I'm just saying. You know, it took him, you know, until, you know, years after his death until his artwork became discovered. You know, and a legacy that I can witness that's all we can ask for. You know, we can, you know, I could be dead and someone, like you said, you know, 20th edition and kids are still discovering my work for the first time. That's a legacy that I think that artists, that we all want artistically to share. That's cool stuff.
It is, absolutely. So being, I guess, you know, being a part of the documentary kind of helps them brings that stuff to light a little bit beforehand, so you don't have to go and die first.
Right. So yes. Exactly. Yeah. I still got a lot of paintings I want to make before I have to kick the bucket.
There you go. So obviously you have your own thing going on. Is that ultimately the goal? Is like you just want to work on your own stuff and building your own worlds, or will you still be like, you know what? Every once in a while, I would still like to get my toe in the D&D world just because I like doing that.
Yeah, I think you're totally right on. I think it's, you know, ultimately, you know, to be able to control something that I own is kind of on the top of the list of life goals. You know, something that I can make a living on with the Cameo Creeps, but also still be a part of the gaming community in some form or fashion. You know, maybe I might have to take less work if the Cameo Creeps start to pick up and take off, and I can start to work with that. But I mean, yeah, I don't see myself slowing down anytime soon. Still, you know, I've got a bunch of stuff to do right now that I can't talk about, but it's cool.
So I would like to throw out a suggestion.
Yes.
So the next time you do a Kickstarter for the Cameo Creeps and you're building out the characters, just like you to consider maybe doing an accompany PDF to go along with for maybe some 5e, stat out your characters.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Now, they did it with Animalis Atlas or something. I always butcher it. I can't talk.
Uh-huh.
But you know, it was like variations on a lot of different D&D monsters, but it was an art book, right? And they did the company in PDF. It was from Metal Weave Games as part of the Kickstarter. So whenever anyone does anything like that, I'm like, you got do the PDF with it. I think that's an awesome idea.
Yes.
There was a couple projects like that where the only
Was
reason
it totally separate content though, or was it the same? Oh, wow, that's cool.
It was the same
Like you could
content.
get the PDF, or you could get the book, and each one had different content. Or...
No. Well, what it was you would get the book, and if you got the book, you got the PDF. The PDF was the game mechanics. The art book was the story and the pictures and the art.
Oh, that's really cool.
So, like, I like the idea of, here's the thing, if you wanted to hand it out at your table and be like, you found this in the game, or if you just want to put it on your coffee table, you can.
Yeah.
But, you know, either way, like, it had this dual use to it. And
right.
So I thought it was really cool so that, you know, as a game master and a gamer, you could take all this stuff and put it right in your game because you had the PDF and it didn't, and, you know, the game stats and mechanics aren't making the book look uglier.
Right.
You know, so I just found it was an extra value add, and I've personally have backed 2 Kickstarters because they did it that way that I might not have otherwise.
Oh, wow, that's cool. That's good to know. Yeah, good stuff.
Well, you know what? There's so much great stuff out there, and when you're trying to figure out what you can spend your money on,
right?
Sometimes it's just little things like that is what pushes you over.
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
We do have a question from DM Dom. How does the work for yourself pay versus contracting jobs? Could you afford to only work for yourself?
That's a really good question. No. The Cameo Creeps work that I'm doing is bearing fruit. Is it enough for me to make a living on? No. In fact, I haven't even paid myself for it at all. The intention is to continue to roll the funds into the business, whether it's traveling or going to a convention or whatever, to keep the momentum going with the cash flow from the business. My personal income comes from working freelance with WotC and Hasbro and D&D and whatever. So they are separate entities, but eventually the goal is to get the Cameo Creeps to be able to live off of. Yeah.
Have you? I'm not as familiar with Paizo products, but have you done work for them as well?
Oh, I've done a ton. Yeah,
okay,
I've done a ton of stuff for Pathfinder. Yeah, I haven't done anything for their new one, Starfinder.
Okay.
Because I just don't. I'm not a sci-fi artist. There is a difference. Yeah, but I've done. I did cover work for the supplement. I think it was a supplement. The Anti-Heroes Handbook. I did the cover art for that, and I did the cover art for Black Markets. Came out 2 years ago, I believe. And then I've done a ton of interior work for their games. So
I don't personally care for the game as much, but they put together some really nice books.
Oh yeah, their books look fantastic.
Like,
well, and see, that's another thing that I would like to kind of touch on is that I'm not a brand artist. Okay, well, what do I mean by that? I mean that I am not the one who's constantly doing the artwork for the covers of their books, and they're using that artwork to sell their products. I am a filler artist. I fill the gaps and what they need. So, you know, as an example, Jeff Easley was a brand artist for D&D 2nd edition. You know, but because there's so much art that they need to produce, they have to freelance out. They have to outsource other artists to do it. So the Cameo Creeps are my own brand that I'm developing. I am the face. My artwork is the face of that brand. Whereas with the Dungeons and Dragons or the Pathfinder stuff, I am not a brand artist like Wayne Reynolds is for Pathfinder. And there is a difference there. Just because I do work for these games doesn't mean that I'm the face of those games artistically, because there are other artists who are doing that. Tyler Jacobson right now is the face for 5th edition. His artwork is on all the covers. So,
I've never even heard his name before.
How the business goes. What's that?
I've never actually heard his name before.
Oh, Tyler Jacobson?
Yeah.
Oh, man, he's fantastic.
And I'm looking at his stuff all the time.
Incredible talent.
Yeah, so that's terrible. That's what I mean. Like, as I delve deeper, like, I'm learning more about the industry and the people behind everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, the goal for me is to create my own brand, my own look. And the Cameo Creeps are right now what I'm doing is that, to do that. I haven't relied too heavily on, like, Patreon, Kickstarter. I've done a couple, but for the most part, there are venues for artists to make money doing their own thing, and Patreon is certainly one of them that can be successful, and certainly Kickstarter as well, or Indiegogo. And I've seen all 3 platforms work really well for artists. So
it is a good time to be alive and be a creator of any sort.
It really is. We're really lucky to have the internet to do this kind of stuff, to have these things, and to have just, I mean, it's almost like you have to, for me, I had to research, like, I think I researched for almost a year, like, what was the best platform to do this at? Where is it going to get the most exposure? How can I utilize it for my marketing? It's like, wow, this is like right all at my fingertips, and I can find it right away, and I can find answers right away. And when I was starting out, oh man, I had a super crappy old iMac, like the big bubbly colored ones. Do you remember those? And like, it was super slow, dial up, and like, so I would be like, I'm not gonna figure out how to find images. I'll just go to the library. And like, the only thing I was using the computer for was for email. And so, this was late 90s, early 2000s. So it was like, so much has changed in the 18 years that I've been freelancing for the better. It's really been a really cool time to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's one of the things we kind of talk about a little bit on the show is like when we started, when we were gaming as young adults, like I didn't have my first personal computer. I was like married and had bought my own house. Mm-hmm. And even comparing what we do now as far as production and stuff like that, and with the new crop of creators that are coming up that are like 20 years younger than us, like they grew up with a lot more technology.
Yes.
So I feel like it's probably a little bit easier for them.
Mm-hmm. They're really quick with it. They understand it really well because they grew up with it. So it's like, I have a funny little story. I have a funny story. My brother is a fantastic graphic designer. He does a lot of my design work. He designed my websites, and he's a professional designer in Cleveland. And he was working on a project with a couple of younger artists, and he said, "Okay, well, I need to develop graphic icons for a telephone, for a ladder, a fire extinguisher, or some type of icons that were, graphically you could see and recognize, like the men and women graphic icon on the bathrooms, And so he gave this project to his young designers, and they brought back, they didn't know what the icon was for the old-fashioned telephone. And they recognized the iPhone icon, but they were like, "What's that?" And Dan was like, "That's a telephone." And they were like, "What?" Like, they didn't know that was what, like with the cord, and the telephone. And so that just shows, right? Yeah, and that there was a dial on there and everything. And he was like, he was like, "Oh, right, yeah, you guys never grew up with that. We're old."
My nephew was like, he wanted to solve the problem of they kept losing the cordless phones.
Uh-huh.
He's like, you know, if they would attach a string to the phone and attach the string to the wall, then we'd always know where it is and be able to find it. And it's
Oh
just
my
funny.
gosh, that's funny. We're going backwards.
We're going backwards. Yeah, so you know, it is kind of funny to see that go along. And I remember one time, you know, I was talking to my grandmother. She's passed away like two years now, but like I guess maybe a year or two before that, I was talking with her. And I remember asking her, I was like, did you ever think you would see the things in your lifetime that you did? You know, because
Yeah, really.
she was close to 90 when she passed away, right around 90. She might have been 89. And so when I had asked her, she was probably like 87, 85 at the time. And, you know, you think about the things that they saw, you know, people traveling into space and
yes,
and you know, and automobiles and cars, and you know, they just the how fast things advanced. And
right?
I just
Flying
remember,
across the country.
yeah,
From fly to New York to L.A. You know,
and I just remember the look in her eyes when I asked her that, as she kind of like thought back, and like the surprise and shock and like wonder that was like on her face, almost like a little kid when they see something for the first time.
Right?
You
Yeah.
know, as she kind of like thought about it and comprehended it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, things have just moved very quickly, but for the better, in my opinion. You know, like I said, it's just a fantastic time to be an entrepreneur. I mean, you have all these opportunities that you can dive into and make them work for you.
No,
They're all
absolutely.
customizable. Everything's customizable. It's great.
Even little things like there's only a couple states in the country that have a drive-in movie theater still. And I, you know, and we went to some when I was a kid, and I remember, and we still have one. So every summer we try to make like one trip out with the kids to the drive-in theater. You know,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, it's like, it's not like the experience is like amazing, but I know there's gonna come a point in their life where that probably won't exist anymore unless it becomes like some like retro fad or something. But they'll be like, oh, you know, they'll be able to remember back and be like, oh, you know, we used to do that thing that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I watched the complete seasons of the Twilight Zone on Netflix and just put it on in the background. And just to kind of, I don't know, they were so fun. You know, the special effects were terrible, but the stories were really good and human and fun. And, you know, it's good to go back and see what has come before you, you know.
Although I do always look out at the wing, you know, when we're flying, just to make sure.
Right. You have to.
Yeah. And
I know the next time I fly, I will be doing that exact same thing.
and you know, we're laughing, right? But how many people that are in the chat are going to watch this and are like, they're not even going to have any idea what we're talking about. So
Go watch the Twilight Zone, kids.
yeah. I mean,
And you gotta talk like this.
the only way we can get any more, you know, if we want to get even more obscure, is start talking about MASH and stuff as well. But but you know, like you said, it's
classic television, man. Classic television.
It's a good time to be alive. You know, people that actually really want to do a thing, if they really have their heart set on it, they could probably do it.
Yep.
You know? So, what's the next show for you?
Next show, I will be at Gen Con in August, from August 1st or August 2nd to the 5th. And I'm really looking forward to that show. I'll be on the exhibitor's floor. I don't have my booth number in front of me, but if you go to cameocreeps.com and you go to the events page, I have everything there. So I'll be selling Cameo Creeps jewelry and pendants and pins, and of course the Cameo Creeps themselves. I'll have some original artwork there as well for to sell. So if you want to pick up something for a new upcoming set, and if you stop by and chat, you know, that would be awesome. I love to talk. So I'm stuck in my studio all the time, so I don't get to talk to I don't get to socialize very often. So
Humans.
When I go to a convention, I'm like, blah, 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 blah.
Well, surprisingly though, you walk by some artist booths and they don't even look up. So
Yeah, I know. That's a pet peeve of mine. No, you have to interact with the people that are there. Um,
it's
I
funny because I was talking to, well, anyone who's good at boothing, and you can tell who they are, right? Because when you're talking to them, their eyes they're like a rodent. Their eyes are constantly darting as you're talking to them in the booth
yeah,
because they're looking to see if they need to help somebody.
and that's actually one of the reasons why I don't like to draw at conventions,
Yeah.
because your head's down and you're drawing. Well, and so somebody walks by who might be interested or want to talk, like you totally ignore them. Um, but it's different at every show. I mean, comic conventions are different because people want that artist to draw that particular character, and they're there to do that. They're there to make money at drawing sketches and stuff. And so, you know, but I just personally just chose not to do that, and because, like I said, I like to interact with people and be social. So
I want to thank the mod, James Leslie, from the site. The Cameo Creeps will be back for the best 4 days of gaming with the new Creeps products and merch, booth 161.
there we go. That's it.
Yeah. Will you be hitting PAX Unplugged?
I will not. That's out west, correct?
No, that is east.
East.
Other
Okay.
direction. Philadelphia.
Other direction. I will be at the show after Gen Con. I'll be at Son of Monster Palooza in Burbank, which is a horror convention. And then I'll be at Spooky Empire then during Halloween in Orlando, Florida. And that'll finish off my year for conventions.
It makes sense. Cameo Creeps going with the more horror theme.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. I'm finding my home there. I did Monster Palooza for the first time. So there's Monster Palooza in the spring, and then there's Son of in the fall. And so I did Monster Palooza proper in the spring this past April, and it was a fantastic show. And I'm still, in a way, I'm kind of reaping the rewards from it. Really, I'm glad I went. I'm glad I spent the money. Because I'm in Ohio, so it was a trek to get out to California. But I'm really glad I did it. I'm really glad I took the risk and did it, because it was a really great show and a lot of really great people, a lot of passionate people with their art and their fandom, and they just love all things horror, spooky, and fun. And the Cameo Creeps just fit right in. So I'm going back for sure.
Cool. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to see, like I said, an RPG connection to that, because it does kind of have.
Oh man.
It does kind of have that Ravenloft feel, especially when Ravenloft kind of went to like the what is it, was it the Red Mist or something? Yeah. So it would definitely be kind of cool to see your spin on things.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, if I did it, I would want it to have those elements of whimsy that I like. Going to the market for a fashionable beheading, because that's what everybody is doing, and all the ladies need to have their head decapitated because that's what you do. Those little things that I would want to interject into an RPG that are just fun little world building things that gamers could take and run with.
Are there non-supernatural folks in your world?
No. And if there is, I can't talk about it just yet.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to checking that out. I'm definitely curious to see what happens with the novellas and where that goes.
Yes, very excited about those. Very, very excited. It's going to be really fun. I can't wait to do the illustrations for the cover and for the interior stuff too. And Jeff is a fantastic writer. G.D. Folkson is a fantastic writer, and I just got to read the first draft, actually, of the manuscript, and I'm really happy with it. It's really fun.
What will be the main character or protagonist?
There's two, so it would be, and they're a team. Sir Zombert Braincleaver, who is the captain of the guard of the Zombie King, and his counterpart, Lady Miriam Lillithid, who is kind of a dark alchemist, and they have to solve a mystery about what happened to the throne. Let's just put it that way. But it's really fun. Really, really fun.
I am going to take one last question before we wrap it up from Cardboard Fortress. How much is Screw on Head is inspiration?
Screw on Head.
I'm going to say none.
Yeah, I don't know. That's Mignola's, right? That's Mike Mignola's. Mike Mignola's thing, right?
I have no idea.
I think it is. None. Mike's doing his own thing.
But and also, you've said earlier you try and stay away from other people's works just to not pollute.
To not be influenced. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that just creep in because I'm a student of pop culture, so there crossover can happen. But the Mike Mignola stuff, the Screw on Head, I believe that's what he's talking about. I know exactly what he's talking about.
He said what?
That's a Victorian thing. That's not an Elizabethan thing. Elizabethan's another between 13 to 1600. Victorian's like 1800s. So my Cameo Creeps take place right after the medieval period. So there's this revolution in science and alchemy and all those things, art, fashion, those are the things that I'm gonna architecture, those are all the things that I'm gonna focus on with the world building. So
the look and feel. So with that, let's we're gonna wrap this puppy up. What do you want to leave people with before we head on out?
Keep gaming, keep playing games, because they're fun.
And you need to keep doing freelance artwork. So
yeah, and I need to keep working. Exactly. So keep playing games so I can keep working and making art for you guys.
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on, Chris. I really appreciate it. You actually had filled in kind of short notice, which really helped me out.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much, David. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and thanks everyone for hanging out with us in the chat today. And so until next time, stay nerdy.